Praise the name of the living God. I'm Mrs. Freda Kisaame, a member of Deliverance Church, Jinja. I welcome you to today's message and sharing. I'll just lower my facial mask. It's a beautiful morning, and I thank God for this opportunity to share His word and His message. I bring you greetings from my family, my husband and children. I also bring you greetings from Deliverance Church, Jinja. I'll be sharing on the topic, glorifying God in my workplace. I want us to note, dear friends, that my presence and your presence in the workplace is not just by secular appointment, but a divine placement. My workplace is my mission field. I realize that in my workplace, I need to preach the gospel by deeds and by words. Let's also know that work is not a punishment, but a commission, even before the fall of man. We get this from Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15. Take note that there will be work in heaven. We see this very clearly in Revelation chapter 4, verses 8, 10, and 11. The 4 beasts and the 24 elders worship God day and night, saying, Holy, 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 worthy is the Lamb that sits upon the throne. Let's look at something about work attitude. Colossians chapter 2, verse 23. I'll read. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord, and not unto men. Yes, that's the word of God. The workplace offers an opportunity, and indeed a unique opportunity, to us to portray the excellence of our God-given gifts and abilities. Did you know that? I want to say something about work instruction. Christians should work in such a way that God's name is not slandered. This is in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 1. Let's look at work reality. Each person is called to work. You are called to work. I am called to work. Some as businessmen or businesswomen, others are administrators. We also have lawyers. We've got teachers. We've got house helps. We've got porters. We've got mothers working in homes. We also have students doing student work. Now, the difference is some are paid plenty of money. The remuneration is really high. Others are paid less. And still others are not paid at all. Consider the stay-home moms. They are not paid anything. Okay. How should Christian employees and employers glorify God in the workplace? Consider this question. I'll first talk about employees. The Bible makes it very clear and gives a number of guidelines, about 8 or so guidelines concerning employees. 1. Employees ought to respect their employers. Respect is uncompromisable. The first letter of Paul to Timothy, chapter 6, verse 1. We all know the adage that goes, or the English saying that goes, that familiarity breeds contempt. We've seen this in our communities. Where there's familiarity between employee and employer, eventually there's contempt. Eventually there's disruption of business. So respect for their employers is paramount. 2, work with all their heart. Employees should work with all their heart. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, as we shortly read. 3, obedience to masters in everything. Everything. Sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 22. Employees should avoid a life of complaining. Oh, complaining. It's like a cankerworm in our community. Complaints. Maybe the pay is too little. Maybe there is inconsideration on part of the employer. A lot of complaints. Employees should have an evangelistic focus. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 1. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 12. That doesn't mean the ground is always level. No. Titus chapter 2 verse 9 and Philippians chapter 2 verses 14 to 15. Next, work with integrity. Titus chapter 2 verses 9 to 10. An employee should be wise and discerning. Wisdom. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 16. They are prayerful. An employee should be prayerful, not just working and say, I will work.com, and at the end of the day, I will go home with my pay. A Christian employee must be prayerful. Colossians chapter 4, verses 3 to 4. They positively make use of every opportunity. Colossians chapter 4, verse 5. Talks of redeeming the time. Okay. Second last point about employees. They portray gracious, salty conversations at the workplace. Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. When everybody else is complaining about the boss, when everybody else is complaining about work conditions, your conversation should be seasoned with salt. Be a moderator in your conversations. Finally, the employee should be devoted to his or her work and should be devoted to the employers. Okay, so much said about the employees. Let's look at employers too. 1. They are or should be devoted to the welfare of their employees. First letter of Timothy, chapter 6 and verse 2. They pay their employees fairly. A good Christian employer pays their employee fairly. Luke chapter 10, verse 7. Do not milk the workman until there is nothing more to milk, but not thinking about the workman's employee. Pay fairly. We talk of discipline. There will be times when an employer may need to discipline the employee, but they discipline fairly. The letter of Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 6. Employers should also pray for their employees. Finally, employers model Christ to their employee. Ask yourself, if Christ was here, what would he do? How would he treat this employee? What would his view be about such an incident or such a situation? So model Christ to their employees is what the employer Christian should do. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 15. So much said about the employer. Let's conclude this. Conclusion. I started on a keynote that my presence in my workplace is not just by secular appointment, okay, but a divine placement. How do we glorify God in our workplace? We looked at a few points, and now we are concluding. Christian employees should respect their employers. That cannot be compromised. 2, they should serve with an evangelistic focus. Yearn for opportunities to share Christ at your workplace. They should be devoted. Do not work half-heartedly, but be devoted. Employers, Christian employers should model Christ. That is 1. And 2, they should be mindful of the welfare of their employees. This brings us to the end of our sharing. We are still in the lockdown, although the lockdown has also been eased. So do not forget to wear your facial mask when you go to public. That's it. And do not forget that you need to wash hands using soap. I have hand washing gel here. Use this under running water. Wash for at least 20 seconds. We also have sanitizer here. Apply some and give to whoever comes around. This is what you ought to do. So long. We wish you well. Let's continue to trust God for something that He can do in this lockdown. God bless you.